Thank you, folks, for joining us. I'm Jonathan Wool. I'm chair of the Hunterdon-Warren group, and we're going to have Kip Cherry introduce our speaker for the night. Before she does, I should say. I just want to make a couple of announcements. First, we've had some donations, and I just don't want to mention those people's names because they don't have their permission to tell everybody, those people, but we're very grateful for whatever donations that you can provide, either national, state, or our local groups. We have folks who are coming and specifically giving a donation to the local groups. And you just specify that on a check if you want to send it, a donation to the state chapter. Thank you again for those folks who have made a donation. As far as meetings coming up in the future, we are planning for next month to have Linda Mead, director of the DNR Greenway, talk about the Bonaparte property. And it's going to be quite exciting. It's the Bonaparte property is extraordinary history. And I think you're going to find it, if you know nothing about the Bonaparte property, I think you'd be quite surprised. I don't want to ruin the surprise for you. And I think you'll enjoy that. And it's a great addition to preservation effort to preserve that property. All right, the next meeting that we're going to be having coming up, let me just find the announcement here, hold on, is on the following meeting, I should say, is March the 2nd at 7, is Jennifer Walker, a postdoctoral associate in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Rutgers University. And she has degrees in ocean sciences from Duke and oceanography from Rutgers. And she's going to present on sea level rise. Because in our state, there's going to be a lot more ocean and a lot less beach for New Jerseyans. Sea levels are rising faster in New Jersey than the global average. The rate of rise is accelerating, putting coastal and low-lying areas in New Jersey at increased risk from coastal flooding and storms. And so the talk is going to describe the current state of sea level change in New Jersey, including the causes of the past and present, as well as efforts to adapt and mitigate, and also discuss the projections for the future. So that is going to be quite interesting as well. So keep that in mind. We don't have any outdoor events planned as yet because of the pandemic, but hopefully by the spring, this National will give us permission to maybe start doing some of those outings once again. So with that, Kip, go ahead and please introduce us.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, all. Welcome to the Sierra Club's lecture, Replacing New Jersey's School Bus Fleet with Electric School Buses. As you probably know, getting electric school buses on the road has been a high priority for Sierra Club New Jersey for more than 5 years, and maybe even more than 6 or 7. It's been a long time. In New Jersey, 42% of greenhouse gases come from the transportation sector. Our hope is that the buses will not only themselves reduce greenhouse gases by using renewable electricity to power the buses, but also will act as traveling billboards to stimulate public interest in the use of electric vehicles for other modes of transportation. Our speaker tonight is Bill Beren, chair of the club's transportation committee. Before retiring, Bill spent more than 33 years with New York City Transit. He will talk about the state's ongoing programs to replace diesel-powered school buses and medium and heavy trucks with electric vehicles. The plan is to replace diesel school buses as they come to the end of their working lives, which in New Jersey for a standard school bus by statute is 15 years. Currently, Sierra, in coordination with a coalition supporting electric school buses, has been working hard on legislation intended to expand New Jersey's school bus funding efforts, while coordinating between key agencies on barriers and problems yet to be solved. I'll now turn the podium over to Bill.
Thanks, Kip. Appreciate that. I want to welcome everybody coming here. A little in awe of the number of people that came to hear me speak. And I want to thank Karen and John for inviting me. As Kip said, the topic tonight is going to be electric school buses in New Jersey. My talk today will last about a half an hour, a little more. If you have questions, please put them in the chat room. And I think, Jonathan, you're going to monitor the chat. And if there are any questions, you'll just break in and ask. I also have planned breaks if people want to ask questions. I'm going to begin with a short description of the work that the Transportation Committee has been doing on electric buses and other issues. Then I'm going to lay out the reasons why electric school buses make sense for New Jersey, followed by a short explanation of the economics and the technical aspects of electrical school buses. And I'm going to conclude with some slides from New Jersey Environmental Protection Department on their programs for encouraging the shift to electric school buses and medium and heavy trucks and their grant program. I want to lead tonight with this article from the Miami Herald that was dated last January 15th. The article describes how a middle school student's science project, she started out to measure the CO2 levels in her school bus, found that the levels of this pollutant were 10 times the allowable limits set by EPA. And her presentation to the local school board convinced the district to switch to electric school buses. To me, there are three key takeaways from this story. The first one is that one person, regardless of her age, can have an outsized impact on public policy. I guess we know this from Greta Thunberg, but it always bears repeating. The second takeaway is that our youth are absolutely concerned about climate change and how important it is to them that we adults clean up our act. And finally, although Holly only measured CO2, there are other pollutants generated by diesel-powered school buses that are directly associated with increased levels of asthma and other lung diseases that afflict children in urban areas such as Newark and Trenton. And that's why the Transportation Committee has been so focused on electric school buses as one of our primary projects. I've been chair of the Transportation Committee for almost 4 years now. We have a wonderful and hardworking core of volunteers who've done extraordinary work, including Kip, who you know, Gary Frederick. Kip and Gary have been working on the electric school bus subcommittee. Judy Minot and Mike Compitelli worked on our school bus video. Jordan Rosenblum and Matthew Bewley started out as interns and now are continuing to work with us as volunteers on New Jersey Transit web applications and bus issues. And Tim Sevner has focused on bikeways and the New Jersey Transit microgrid project. You may not be familiar with this, but New Jersey Transit proposed a frack gas power plant in Kearney to power its North Jersey train lines in the event of another Superstorm Sandy outage. Tim has been working with a coalition of transit and local groups to get New Jersey Transit to consider solar energy as a source for the microgrid. And last week, New Jersey Transit reissued its RFP for the project, asking for a design that includes renewable power. We don't know that they'll actually do it, but at least we've had some impact. The Transportation Committee has its own page on the Sierra Club website. And how to get to our page, about us, our work, and click on transportation. And these were the reports and the electric school bus campaign. As part of the presentations we did for the New Jersey School Board Association, we prepared this little video.
Young people like me are keenly aware of the climate crisis and are always looking for ways to try to address it.
Though most people are aware of it, I don't think people realize how dangerous it is for our future.
Transportation is a huge contributor to climate change, and school buses, and buses in particular, play a very large part of that sector.
Children that ride school buses are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of air pollution. They have still developing lungs, they breathe at a faster rate than an adult, so their potential for exposure is much higher than the average person. So we're focusing on school buses in the urban areas to protect those children and the drivers of the school buses as well. So that program provides 100% of the incremental cost of a new electric vehicle or electric bus, and it also includes the cost of the charging station, which is really important.
There's been a significant amount of interest from not only municipalities, as in public school districts, also from private school bus contractors all over the state, to not have our youth exposed to emissions of any kind, at least direct emissions from a vehicle that they're passengers on and in close proximity to for the majority of their young lives is important to everyone.
We've always been interested in green and trying to green up the fleet. We've always been understanding of the fact that we have a lot of responsibility in regards to carbon footprint. In Los Angeles, we have 5 electric school buses that have been running for some time now. Those buses have been very well received by the school districts.
Getting drivers and keeping drivers is difficult, and a bus that's quieter and is nicer to drive.
Once we get the drivers in the bus, they don't want to leave.
All of the bus manufacturers, I believe, have gone to great lengths to make the bus as similar as possible to what drivers are already accustomed to. And that gives them a certain level of comfort of not thinking that they're stepping into some newfangled spaceship. Same way you would start any other bus. That indicator right there with the arrow, green meaning go, the arrow means you can go forward or backward. The bus is now running.
The buses actually handle much better than a diesel bus does because you've lowered the center of gravity by putting the batteries down low.
And something to think about almost before you start thinking about anything with tires attached to it is infrastructure and planning your charging equipment.
Making sure the electric is available, the proper electric is available, I will say, the proper voltage, the proper amperage, and in some instances there's some upgrades that have to be done.
Who knows how these buses are going to work in Newark as opposed to Sussex County? Take Newark, for example. Will the bus be able to do the entire route if there's a day where traffic is backed up for 45 minutes? Or in Sussex County, if there's a snowstorm and it's stuck in a storm is there going to be any issue with the heat being on or whatever? We can do it abstractly, but let's actually put it into place.
It's great to talk about theoretically what would happen, but it's much better to see what happens in practice.
The maintenance factor. The charging stations, there's so many multiple issues that have to be resolved, and I just think this is the way to do it. As a state, we have to give the proper funding to make this happen. And this is an opportunity to really change the way America works. And I just think the timing could not be better.
We really need to meet the moment. This is the time. Everybody is focused on this issue, not just in the state, but nationally and internationally. So we need to capitalize on that and bring whatever available resources we can bring to bear on this.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. That was all done with volunteer labor by members of the Sierra Club. So electric school buses are relatively new technology. The first ones were only built maybe 5-6 years ago. Nevertheless, manufacturers have been stepping up production and sales are growing exponentially. They're no longer a future dream, as we said, but they're now a reality. Diesel buses are not only a major source of greenhouse gases, which contribute to global warming, but they directly spew what's called black carbon pollutants into the air, directly where children are waiting to board the bus and into the cabin of the bus as they travel to and from school. It's this so-called black carbon that's the leading cause of asthma in school-age children. In contrast, electric school buses generate no tailpipe pollutants. They're easier to maintain. They require no oil changes, no emission testing, fewer engine parts to order and replace. And also electric school buses may earn the school district money by using the stored power in their batteries to sell back to utility companies during peak electric usage hours. Replacing diesel school buses aligns with Governor Murphy's focus on the transportation sector in his energy master plan to combat climate change. As Kip indicated earlier, transportation as a whole contributes about 45% of the greenhouse gases emitted in New Jersey, and a disproportionate majority of that is from trucks and buses, including the 16,000 school buses that operate in the state. Electrification of school buses has attracted nationwide attention. The infrastructure bill signed into law by President Biden earlier this year or last year allocates $1 billion per year nationwide for 5 years for a total of $5 billion to reduce diesel emissions from school buses. Of that, half, $2.5 billion, is allocated specifically for electric battery buses, and another $2.5 billion for other lower emission vehicles. This money will be administered by the EPA, and the New Jersey Sierra Club is a member of a national coalition, the Alliance for Electric School Buses, that's lobbying EPA to allocate all of its grant funds for school bus electrification. New Jersey has 2 programs to fund electric school buses currently. DEP uses funds from the Volkswagen settlement and the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, commonly referred to as RGGI money, for grants to school districts and also to private school bus operators throughout the state. Separately, the Economic Development Agency has a NJZIP program that provides grants for the purchase of electric school buses in 3 greater metropolitan areas, that's Newark, Camden, and New Brunswick. In 3 funding cycles over the past 2 years, DEP has announced grants totaling $24.5 million that was geared to purchase 77 buses distributed among 21 school districts. And some of the grants go directly to the districts if they operate their own. Oops, what happened here? There we go. If they directly to school districts if they operate their own school bus service, or to contractors if the school district contracts that service out. The EDA has not yet awarded any grants for school buses from their program, and hopefully they'll be announcing some awards this spring. Interestingly, the bulk of the grants have gone to North Jersey communities. Of the 21 grantees, only 1, which is Camden, is located in the southern portion of the state, and 3 others were in Ocean County. However, it's important to point out that as of today, none of these buses are currently in service. Factors contributing to the delay include a long lead time for delivery from the manufacturers, a little less than a year, and additional delays associated with installing charging stations and upgrading electric service. As we mentioned, the Sierra Club is backing 2 bills that are pending in the state legislature. A 1971 was introduced by Assemblyman Stanley and passed by the Assembly by a large bipartisan majority in June. S 4077 was introduced by Senator Deignan with input from our committee. The Senate bill expanded the scope of the original legislation and also passed the Senate in December, but also by a large bipartisan majority. While we were initially hoping that these two bills could be reconciled and passed during the remaining days of the lame duck session, this no longer appears to be possible, and we hope that the sponsors will move these bills early in the new session. Senator Deignan has also sponsored another bill, S228, which sets up an unfunded loan program for electric school buses in the Economic Development Authority. This bill passed the Senate, and we're looking to see if the Assembly will pass the legislation before the end of the session.
Bill, let me interrupt you. We have a couple of questions.
Okay.
We want me to ask him as we go.
Yeah.
One question is where is the power coming from? And the second question is, what is the cost difference between a diesel and these electrified buses?
Okay, well, I'm going to cover the cost differential in a little bit, so let me defer that. And I think what you mean, the power is coming from the utility companies, but the question probably refers to whether it's coming from coal power plants or solar power. Right now it's coming from the regular utility. So whatever mix the utility has. Obviously, we would like it to come from renewables, and that's going to be something that we have to work on in the future. I don't believe Kip has more of a handle on this than I do, but I don't believe there are too many school districts that have solar energy on their buildings. So that's something we need to work on in the future. So as I was saying, S47D7 includes a number of improvements that were proposed by the Sierra Club. We worked closely with Senator Deignan to put these amendments in. It creates a 3-year demonstration program funded by the Board of Public Utilities Societal Benefits Fund and the RGGI money. It provides for $15 million in each of 3 years to fund school buses, 2 in each of the 3 districts, North, Central, and South, and requires that at least half of the grantees be environmental justice communities. Whereas 1971 designated the BPU as the program administrator, S4077 gives this function to the DEP, so we can consolidate the 2 grant programs. One drawback is that funding for years 2 and 3 is not guaranteed by the legislation and will depend on annual appropriations in the state budget. The Senate bill also encourages innovation in purchasing options and technology and brings together multiple agencies to resolve regulatory issues such as training people to do annual inspections, training mechanics and bus operators and first responders who need to know how to deal with a school bus that might be in an accident, and ensuring that utility rates don't hinder widespread adoption of electric school buses. Why is a pilot program needed? As the senator said in the video, we don't know how these buses really operate in real world conditions. The bill sets up minimum standards for the buses to be purchased, requires that the recipients report performance information such as actual range miles, mechanical or other failures and other issues directly to the DEP so they can analyze this and establish a database to guide the large-scale replacement of diesel buses going forward. It will also allow the agencies involved to respond quickly to correct any problems that may arise that delay or put roadblocks in the way of full-scale implementation of an electric school bus program. Okay, so someone asked about the economics. The upfront cost of a electric school bus is steep. List price ranges from $250,000 to $400,000. compared to $150,000 to buy a diesel bus. Furthermore, the district or the contractor must also incur the cost of buying and installing charging stations and energy management software. Working with the utility companies can be a challenge if an upgrade to the electric service is required where the buses are parked. Dep Grants, as we indicated, cover the difference between a diesel and electric bus and include the cost of purchasing and installing the charging stations. EDA only pays $100,000 per bus and doesn't include the cost of the charging stations. DP also requires that a diesel bus be permanently retired for every electric bus purchased with its grants funds. We anticipate that the rules for applying for federal grants under the bipartisan infrastructure bill will be announced by EPA in April.
Bill, there's some questions about energy again. And
Okay.
one person mentioned that Union County has a large solar array under construction, which hopefully will contribute to this project. But another comment was that if a bus is charged with grid electricity, it's not going to be 100%. That's not 100% renewable. Is it really reducing CO2 pollution? Since according to the Energy Star program, you need 3 energy units of energy generated at the plant to provide 1 unit of energy at the charging station. So that was the person's comment.
All of that's true, and it's obviously an issue. The immediate impact of electric school buses is that it's going to reduce the pollution in and around the school bus, which is important for children's health. Also, I think the mix of mix of pollutants in the, I could be wrong about this. It's been a long time since I looked at it. But central generating plants have tighter controls on their pollution and better pollution control equipment. So, in the short run, it's not a panacea. It doesn't totally solve the problem, but it's a step in the right direction. And as we move toward a renewable energy economy, that issue will be resolved. We need to fight on that. That's good news that Middlesex County is building this solar array.
Union,
I'm sorry, but wherever that power goes, it's going to be a net positive. So that's good. It's going to offset, whatever's generated from a conventional power plant. Helping districts purchase electric school buses. The districts can take advantage of procurement cooperatives such as the Hunterdon County or the New Jersey Educational Service Commissions, which negotiate contract terms for school districts for various products, including electric school buses. And this avoids the time and the cost associated with individual bids by the individual school district. However, the prices negotiated by these cooperatives may be higher than those that the school district could obtain by direct negotiation with the school bus manufacturers. So districts do need to do their own due diligence before they enter into a contract. Other purchasing options that we're looking to experiment with in the pilot program through the legislation includes leasing the buses directly from a local dealer instead of purchasing it, or entering into a turnkey leasing arrangement with third-party suppliers. There are a number of these companies nationwide in which the third-party company provides the buses, the training, the charging stations, et cetera, and charges the district on either a per bus per year or per mile basis with a minimum 10-year lease agreement. Under these agreements, the bus operators and mechanics continue to be employed by the school district or contractor. Montgomery County in Maryland recently entered into such a lease arrangement for the 250 school buses used in the county. Another interesting option that helps reduce the cost of the purchasing or leasing an electric school bus is the ability to sell the energy stored in the battery back to the local utility company during peak loads when the buses are not being used in the summer, or to power the lights in the HVAC systems in the school campus, reducing the amount of power purchased from the utility. The buses are recharged at night at lower rates, and these options are known as vehicle to grid, or V2G, or vehicle to building, V2B. All of these purchasing options are summarized in the Electric School Bus Buyer's Guide that we prepared and is available on our website. What can individuals do to help speed the introduction of electric school buses in New Jersey? Speak up at local Board of Ed meetings, talk to the school board administrators and the transportation coordinators about grant opportunities and the health and environmental benefits of electric school buses. Become knowledgeable of grant cycles announced by the DEP and encourage your district or contractor to apply. Before I move on to the next topic, any more questions?
There's just one person making a comment that, well, it's another question just came up in. Hold on a second. Again, it's focusing on the actual energy that's being provided to the buses. One person, Harry, mentions that 45% consists of nuclear and 50% fossil and perhaps 5% solar is what's going to be powering these buses, with the expectation that offshore wind power is going to be helping to reduce the amount of non-renewables. And another person made a comment that, or question, would running school buses on biodiesel give a better cost benefit for a level of reduction of pollution, or would hybrid buses running on biodiesel and electric hybrid power? And then we have pretty much in the same vein, how much maintenance is the cost for electric school buses compared to diesel, and the range as well as in miles of these buses.
Right. Well, I'm going to get to those two last questions right now in the next section. Yeah, the energy question, I really don't have an answer to. As the last commenter said, maybe 50% of the power in the state is generated from fossil fuels. And hopefully that's going to go down as we get more power from offshore wind and solar. And that's going to be a net positive, obviously. The question about biodiesel, the coalition, the national coalition and the Jersey Sierra Club is trying to discourage these. There's a lot of proposals from the natural gas industry to run school buses on natural gas and other fuels like biodiesel. These fuels do continue to pollute. They continue to, the pollution is going to come right out the tailpipe and continue to affect students. So that's why I indicated earlier that our lobbying efforts with the Environmental Protection Agency is to try to get them to fund more electric battery buses and not so much these lower pollution but not zero emission vehicles. Anything else, John?
Let's see. Oh, just something else just popped in. The Marty asks, I understand hydrogen power is being explored for heavier vehicles. Would this work similar to battery powered equipment? And if green or blue hydrogen is used, will it be more environmentally friendly than biodiesel or other similar technologies?
Well, fuel cell technology is a very clean technology. Assuming that it's green hydrogen and not blue hydrogen. Green, for those of you who don't know, green hydrogen is produced from solar power and doesn't involve fossil fuels. Blue hydrogen is generated from the burning of natural gas. and is probably more polluting if totally life cycle than just running on regular fossil fuels, gasoline. Fuel cell development and green hydrogen haven't hit stride yet. I think my personal feeling, strictly personal, is that long-term fuel cell technology is probably the way to go in the future, but we're not there yet. It hasn't been developed. It's not available yet in any kind of commercial basis.
You want to discuss, just tell us what you mean by fuel cell technology?
Fuel cells is a way of generating electricity that's used on spacecraft, where the hydrogen is, wasn't prepared to answer that question, but basically it takes hydrogen, generates electricity, and the only byproducts that come out of it is water. So that's there is some experimentation with fuel cell passenger cars. Toyota, I think, has been working on that in Japan, and there are some fuel cell buses, transit buses operating in California, in the Costa, what's the name of that? Just north of San Francisco.
Oh,
Contra Costa transit system, just north of San Francisco. So it is a technology, it is an option, and look forward to further development of it. It's also, being considered as an option for long-haul truckers and other types of vehicles where electric battery right now is not cost effective.
very good.
Okay. So as people have been asking, are electric school buses truly cost effective? So the initial higher cost of electric school buses can be offset over the life of the bus, as Kip said, officially 15 years, from 12 to 15 years, through lower energy costs, zero lubricants, there's no oil changes, there's less wear and tear on the brakes, and there are other cost savings. So the total cost ownership over the life of the bus is projected to be net positive. A study in Twin Rivers, California found that their electric buses delivered a 75 to 80% saving in fuel costs compared to their diesel buses, exceeding the district's expectations. Savings from fuel and maintenance costs came to approximately $15,000 a year. And it's therefore projected that over the 12-year life of the school bus, electric school buses will be cheaper to own and operate than their diesel counterparts. The other main question associated with electric vehicles is range anxiety. Range anxiety refers to the reluctance to buy an electric car due to the fear of draining your vehicle's battery and being stranded on the road, or having to interrupt a long distance trip for hours while your vehicle's battery is recharged. And this is obviously an issue for school buses as well as for passenger vehicles. So let's discuss battery capacity and mileage range. Battery capacity is measured in kilowatt hours. Proterra is a leading American manufacturer of electric transit buses and batteries. Their batteries are used in Thomas-Built school buses. Thomas-Built is a major school supplier here in New Jersey. And the bus we saw in the video is a Thomas-Built bus. As shown here, the total capacity for the Proterra's largest battery is 226 kilowatt hours. But to reduce battery degradation and increase the life of the battery, they recommend that they only use up to 199 kilowatt hours, so you don't drain the battery fully. This translates into a theoretical maximum range of 138 miles, which is calculated by dividing the usable battery capacity, 199 kilowatt hours, by theoretical vehicle efficiency. This would be the equivalent of miles per gallon for an electric bus. Here given as 1.44 kilowatt hours per mile. And that comes out, so Proterra's Thomas Built is saying that their maximum buses can go 138 miles between recharges. Districts can save money by specifying a smaller battery, which effectively reduces their maximum range. And districts therefore need to analyze their route requirements in order to determine the correct trade-off between purchase cost and range. However, the actual vehicle efficiency is affected by driving conditions, including factors such as the outside temperature, the number of stops, driver training, heating and air conditioning loads, and whether you're driving on flat or hilly terrain. So this is one reason why it's important for us to have the pilot program and gather actual operating statistics so we know how these buses perform in the real world.
Now, Bill, there's some questions here before you go too far.
Yeah, that's right.
One question is why is there less wear and tear on these brakes of these new vehicles? And another, there's a few other questions. I don't know if you want to answer that one first.
Okay, I'll answer that one first. Electric vehicles, including cars like Tesla and these electric buses, use regenerative braking, which takes the energy from the braking and puts it back into the battery and recharges the battery from that, and that produces less wear and tear on the brakes.
Mm-hmm. And another person made the comment of that the, I guess, the ratio of carbon per every 100 miles produced needs to be determined for both diesel and for grid, and determine to make a good comparison. And asking you if you can clarify what that if that comparison's been done, and to clarify that.
I do not have any information regarding that.
Okay. Well, one figures that will occur pretty soon. That seems like a common sense thing to do. Now, there's another person makes a comment that there are thousands of Mori cars in use in California, Toyota cars. Many companies are using hydrogen-powered forklifts in their warehouses. Plug Power is being, I lost my spot. I'm building a large hydrogen generation plant in Pennsylvania. They already have one working in New York near Niagara Falls. So there's a lot of research in hydrogen, this person's making a point. Kip mentions that the strategy in New Jersey has been to focus on electric vehicles. Down the road, hydrogen fuel cells might be a solution, but not at present. We have to go all out on electrical vehicles so that we efficiently use the charging stations and other EV infrastructure. And a big focus has to be on training drivers and maintenance workers and inspectors for the school buses. Now, another question is are the buses air conditioned? And if so, does that impact mileage?
Okay, was there a question on the hydrogen, or was that just a statement?
I believe those were statements. I'll double check. Yeah, those are all statements that there's, a lot of work going on in research and development of hydrogen.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem with hydrogen. It's in the research and development stage.
Yeah.
And we know that climate change is real, and we need to move very quickly. And right now we have to do what we have to do. And hopefully hydrogen will come on and, be an assist in future years. Mm-hmm. Right now, the strategy is electric vehicles. I'm sorry, what was the other question?
Well, let's see, we got a few more that are coming in. One was just about air conditioning and
air conditioning, right?
How that impacts on mileage.
Yes, it does impact mileage, as I said. The buses are fully air conditioned. The requirement is that buses be able to maintain internal temperature of 60 degrees. And I think when the temperature is 30 degrees outside. Kip, do you remember what that was?
For the heat, they had to add a supplemental heating element. And so I would expect for air conditioning, they would have to do the same thing to provide the power for the air conditioning. We'll look into that further.
Yeah, each manufacturer is dealing with that separately, and I think it's evolving as battery capacity increases. They'll be able to handle the heating and the air conditioning loads. But that's again why we want to see a pilot program and get results and statistics back from these buses as to how they perform. Next question.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of comments here. One is about just increasing electricity for medium and heavy duty electrical vehicles. Before converting them all to renewables, the question, I guess, is about, can we truly mitigate by electrifying school buses, mitigate the problem? And also in particular, they want to have particulates addressed. Not all pollutants are tailpipe emissions, and one of the major causes of asthma are particulates. I don't know.
Well, the diesel buses produce particulates,
Yeah,
as do trucks. Obviously, there are way more trucks and other diesel vehicles than school buses. School buses is not a be-all and end-all solution. It's a particular solution that has direct impact on the school children that ride the buses and stand outside of them as they wait and the bus is idle. And these impacts are very real in our urban areas.
Now, one person asked about the Proterra company that's working in Philadelphia, Septa Group. Are you familiar with their buses?
I'm familiar with their transit buses. They don't produce school buses. They work with school bus manufacturers and sell them their battery and drivetrain.
They raised some concerns about those buses. Are you familiar with any of the problems that they might be having?
I haven't heard of any major issues with Proterra buses. From what I've read, the transit companies that have purchased Proterra buses are fairly satisfied with them. I know there have been issues with transit buses that are produced by BYD, which is a Chinese company. And there have been many examples of transit properties that have gone out and bought fleets of these buses, and they haven't worked. There was one community in New Mexico, I think Albuquerque, where that was a case. And again, that's why we want the pilot program, is to be able to compare results between vendors. There are 4 or 5 major electric school bus manufacturers. There's Navistar, Thomas Built, Bluebird, and the other one just kind of skipped my brain.
Okay.
Lionel from Canada, and Lion Electric from Canada. And what we want to be able to do with the pilot program is compare the results of the vendors and see which vendor has the most reliable equipment. This is very key. You can't go out and just replace these overnight without vetting the companies and vetting the equipment. Absolutely.
Now, a couple of comments. One is that solar that you use to create the hydrogen, it's going to be having conversion losses to convert it back in from the fuel cell back to the electric. So in this person's opinion, hydrogen will not be as efficient as electric.
I'm not a hydrogen scientist. I can't answer your question.
Okay. And the next one is, how long does it take to recharge these buses?
I'm getting to that right now.
Okay, and just a couple more things before you move on. Will there be supplemental power for heat, for example?
Uh, Again, some companies, some of the manufacturers have supplemental gas-powered heaters. Other companies are powering it off the electric, so that's a design issue that again needs to be vetted and seeing which one works best.
And will there be buses with like solar panels on the roofs? And if a bus loses electricity in a traffic jam, what can happen to anticipate those type of problems?
I don't know anyone that's putting solar panels on the roof, but that's an interesting question. And it would be no different than a diesel bus that breaks down in the middle of the route. You get a tow truck and you pull it out and you service it.
Right. Marty's brought up that there are some concerns about the Proterra buses. He mentioned that in a WHYY investigation, a good portion of the buses are out of operation. At least 24 of the vehicles at this time. So, like you say, this is the initial efforts, and they're trying to work out the bugs. The more we do this, the better we're going to be.
Right.
The last one is from Kip. There has been discussion about solar panels for supplemental power, and also they're looking into the heat pump proposal, and that the manufacturers, as you said, are looking into these type, whether or not they'll provide them as standard packages or not. And that's about it so far. So let's let you continue. Otherwise, we'll be here at midnight.
Yeah, not too much more.
Okay.
So the person just asked how long does it take to recharge?
Mhm.
So EV chargers coming. Did I skip those? No. Okay. What's line 28? Charges come in different power levels, which affects the time it takes to charge the bus. In this calculation, with the Proterra large battery, 199 kilowatt hours, divided by the charger power measured in kilowatts, which is 60 kilowatts, it takes about 3.3 hours to fully charge a bus from empty to full. The type of charger determines the power feed required. Most fast chargers are DC and require a higher voltage than that may be currently delivered to the facility. And therefore, it's important that the bus manufacturer, the electrical contractor, and the utility company work together to design and schedule the installation of the charging equipment. As I mentioned, Trenton has had the buses we saw in the video were delivered last April. They're still not on the road because of issues that public service had in delivering power. And this is a continuing issue that seems to be a problem with the electric school buses. As we just saw, a DC charging station can fully charge a bus up to 3 hours. A lower rated AC charging station may take up to 8 hours. In this example, it shows that a central charger can have up to 4 charging dispensers. However, only one of these dispensers can charge a bus at a time. So, you have 4 buses, but it's going to take 8 or 12 hours to charge the bus. So that's, a factor that needs to be taken into consideration. Furthermore, if a district wants to integrate what we discussed as vehicle to grid or vehicle to building technology, that also needs to be specified during the design stage, as the chargers need to be configured to manage bidirectional power flow. Most school buses today being built use a plug-in charger, but for large fleets, such as in a New Jersey Transit bus garage, a pantograph overhead charging system similar to trolley lines on the street may be more economical and practical This is an example of an overhead charging system that was built for Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. It supports 100 buses and 150 recharges per day. I think we have all the questions already, right? So continue.
And there's just a few more comments. I think we can wait till the end so you can finish.
Okay, and the next set of slides are taken from the presentation that Peg Hanna gave at our webinar at the School Board Association. It's absolutely a fact that global warming is a reality, not a myth. We're recording the highest CO2 levels in 2 million years, seeing record-breaking sea level rises, the lowest level of Arctic sea ice in 1,000 years, and unprecedented glacial retreat. That's, you know, part of the argument that we've been making, that we need to move ahead right now with electric, even while we look at other technologies that may come in the future. And in addition to greenhouse gas emissions and global warming, you know, the same pollutants from fossil fuels are still, you know, an issue. The transportation sector, both on-road cars, trucks, and buses, and off-road planes, boats, and other technologies continue to generate the lion's share of nitrous oxides and over 25% of the fine particulate. And fine particulate is what causes many of the lung problems. New Jersey passed a electric vehicle law in 2019 that set goals for passenger vehicle electrification. These goals include having 350,000 EVs on the road by the end of 2025 and 2 million by 2035. Another goal is to put in 400 fast chargers at 200 locations and 1,000 level 2 charges, which take longer, to be available for public use by the end of 2025. And another goal is to electrify 25% of the state's fleet, also by the end of 2025. There were amendments passed in 2021 that requires developers to incorporate electric charging stations into their plans, into their developments, and provides a model EV ordinance for municipalities to adopt. To reduce statewide greenhouse gas emissions, excuse me, New Jersey entered into a memorandum of understanding with 16 other states to develop a joint action plan, which, and this is from the memorandum, identify barriers and propose solutions to support widespread electrification of medium and heavy duty vehicles. Last month, the DEP formally adopted the California Advanced Clean Truck Rules, known as ACT or ACT, which set interim targets for the percent of new trucks and bus sales in the state that have to be zero emission vehicles. And the goal is to reach 100,000 by 2050. The ACT rules sets individual targets by class of vehicle and by year to help achieve these goals. To encourage the purchase of zero emission trucks and buses, the state will be offering grants. Funding for this grants come from RGGI, possibly from the federal infrastructure bills and from other sources. There's a website that DEP has, stopthesoot.org, where you can download the application forms. Applicants must provide a budget and procurement timeline, a description of the project, including a list of the vehicles that will be replaced and a list of the partners that they're working with in order to demonstrate that the project is shovel ready. Regarding passenger vehicles, there's a website, drivegreen.nj.gov, which provides useful information on available incentives for buyers of electrical passenger cars. And you can sign up at stopthesoot.org to be put on an email list for notifications of program updates and funding announcements. And this is Peg's email address if anyone's interested in contacting her. And thank you for listening. And
Thank you so much.
Patient.
Yep, we got a few questions here, and then I guess we could just open up to everybody.
Yeah, I'll stop the share. Yep.
All right, so. One person is just talking about charging stations and whether or not you can use these charging stations with different companies that produce vehicles. Will it be an easy flow from like a Tesla vehicle can use a charging station and a Ford and so forth? Is there requirements on the state to make sure that these charging stations all coordinate? I mean, these companies all coordinate in creating the same type of charging station?
Well, on the electric school bus issue, I think you're better off working with the manufacturer to specify the charging station that works best with their buses. On the passenger side, I'm not really an expert on the passenger rules. I know there's a lot of issues with Tesla being proprietary.
But Chevy provides you with an adapter so you can use Tesla's plug.
Okay,
So I think they're all.
Okay. Another person asked questions about different types of transport besides buses. One person says that New Rochelle has a huge fleet of VEO scooters and free electric shuttles for commuters and shoppers, which is very successful. Any initiatives that you know of in our state to do the same?
Trenton just released a plan. I don't think that I'm not sure what the status of it is. There was just a press release last month that they wanted to have a fleet of passenger vehicles, electric passenger vehicles in Trenton that people could call like an Uber or Lyft, but it would be regulated and sponsored by the city. Rates would be fixed, I think, at $250 or something. Jersey City has a similar service, but it's not all electric. Jersey City's project, I think, charges $250, and basically it's designed to get people to and from the last mile from public transportation, or take them to a doctor's appointment or personal task.
Okay, Joanne, you might want to turn your sound off. Bill, as far as, I'm a little confused about your response. Let's say I have an electric bike and I want to get it recharged and I'm out in public.
Right.
Can I go to one of these charging stations and use an adapter and charge my bike with it?
Don't know anything about that. Sorry, John.
Okay.
You're talking the electric car charging station, not an electric school bus, right?
Right. Okay.
I don't know what kind of charges they do.
Okay. Very good. That was one of the person's questions, but very good. I think we're out of questions now. I don't know if we want to open it up for a general discussion. I know Jeffrey has his hand up for the past few minutes, so you might want to ask you a question.
Sure.
And I'll step back. Jeffrey, do you have a question?
Yes. I think this is terrific, and I'm glad I attended tonight. One of the questions I've been asking myself is, if we look historically, the major problems we've had in electric systems has been the grid going down, particularly recently in Texas. I would argue Sandy did a job on our grid, not other things. It might not be in the interest of all the particular parties to have a central electrification. Obviously, right now, gas and oil are shipped by many different ways physically. It would seem to me that in looking at this area, there needs to be a balance in terms of how we handle the huge amounts of electrification of vehicles we're hopefully getting, and hopefully down the road, heating homes, huge amounts of that. But that's going to require a willing utility company and planning and efforts, I would think. I'm not a scientist, I don't pretend to be. I'm wondering how, if anybody has any thoughts on that, and or if you think things will just go in a nice, even way where we don't have to worry about imbalances between the grid and electrification and vehicles and all the good things that are happening now with wind power. They could probably easily get it from the wind, from the turbines to the shore. But then when it gets into that mix master of a grid, it could throw everything really off balance. And I don't know if there's any thoughts in that area or anything that can say to me, this is really being handled, Jeff. We don't really have to think about it.
I totally agree with you. I think it's a mistake to put all of our eggs in the electrical basket. I know there's been discussion, and this is strictly my personal opinion, discussion about requiring new construction to be totally electric, no natural gas water heaters or stoves or things like that. I know, from personal experience, I've had extended outages, Sandy and other storms, and luckily my gas, hot water, and building heat continue. So I don't want to be dependent on the grid personally, but we certainly need to reduce the amount of fossil fuels that we burn and use. Yeah, and the other thing is the master plan. Governor Murphy spent millions of dollars hiring consultants to do the energy master plan. And there was really no forecast of what the future electrical demand would be after all of this electrification and how we're going to meet that. And I think it's a real question and absolutely needs to be dealt with much more fully than it has been to date. But that's, again,
we as environmental
that's my personal opinion.
I disagree a little. I think the central electrification is in the end the answer. If we can do things in a balanced way, that's just an opinion. So I personally, talking to many people around, don't see a way of approaching this as environmentalists and as activists. And I just feel important. I had to say that that's something that I think deserves more attention, both on a national club level and statewide, and getting individuals involved. And it'll be interesting. I think I'd like to see the state do more work there. I'm very disappointed that we couldn't pass Biden's electrification, or where he was going to put a lot of money into the grid.
Yes.
Okay.
And apparently Manchin said no, because, like I said, if I was an enemy of clean energy, which can easily be captured by a well-developed grid, I would certainly say, well, let's leave things alone. Let's leave things alone, and don't let them build that grid. Don't let them do that. So interesting times, and I think we got our work cut out for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Good questions, Jeff. Folks, before we wrap it up for the evening, anybody else have a couple more questions? I know, Kip, you made a couple of comments. I don't know if in the comment section if you want to bring anything up before we end as well. Nope, okay. Kip was just mentioning some things about needing certifications for folks in order to promote and to enhance this process. And another person had a question about, is there going to be a copy of this presentation, a recording of this presentation? Yes, John Kashrik's made a recording of it, and hopefully somebody might be able to edit it and we can get it.
We'll put it on our YouTube channel.
Put it on
I'll send out a
YouTube
link.
channel. Good, all right. Well, Bill, since I think that's all the questions, I want to thank you very much for your thoughtful presentation. I think it sounds like we're making some progress in this world, slowly, tiny little steps, but it sounds like, all of us, trying to work together towards this goal of trying to be better stewards of this planet and taking better care of our kids. They don't breathe in all these particulates is a big step in the right direction. So thank you again.
I just wanted to thank everybody for staying and listening. I hope I wasn't too boring, and appreciate it. And let's go out and try to change the world.
We will.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks. Just remember, next month, we're going to be having a talk on the Bonaparte preservation property, and the month afterwards in March, we also have another presentation to do. So thank you very much for coming in tonight, and I wish you all a great January, and I'll see you in February.
I just want to mention, we actually had Janet Zahn attending from Michigan. So we are making great strides here in New Jersey, spreading the good word. So thank you for attending, Janet.
Excellent. Bye-bye, folks.
Right.